Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Hey everybody, it's Jared. Welcome to another episode of All Things Crime. I am out of my mind excited about my guest this morning. So I was at CrimeCon about a week ago, and I saw a presentation that these guys did. And just so that I make sure I get your pronunciations right, they're both lawyers out of Seattle, and Ann Bremner and Evan, is it Berryalt?
Perfect.
Oh, man, what a lucky strike that was. I guess even a blind squirrel can find an acorn once in a while, right? But these guys did a presentation on a couple of things that I think you as the listening and watching audience are going to be really interested in hearing. Not only the Susan Powell case, which especially those of you listeners here in Utah and even in the Seattle area would have special interest in, but also, Evan, you covered, man, I can't even pronounce it right. Is it Familicide?
Familicide.
Familicide, sorry. Anyway, that's definitely going to have you get into that. But you guys, as attorneys up there for Freibuck law firm, and just I've been doing some research on you guys and the number of cases and the things that you do as attorneys is phenomenal. And, you know, congratulations for having such amazing careers already. But to get us started, you know, I'd obviously, Ann and Evan, I want to have each of you introduce yourselves briefly. But Evan, to get started, man, you initially majored in kinesiology. How did you end up being a lawyer, going from kinesiology to law?
It's a great question. I actually, out of college, I went to work for the Seattle Mariners, and I thought that was going to be my future. I worked as a strength coach. I thought I was going to do exercise performance stuff. And then I had this kind of a rare opportunity to go live down in Argentina, and I took a different path, and I did that for a little while, and I came back, and I was trying to decide what was going to be best for me, what was I going to do, and I took the LSATs. I did pretty well in the LSATs, and I decided to go to law school, kind of on a whim, to be honest. But when I was there, I took some trial advocacy classes, and I was hooked. Once I got that opportunity, once I stepped into a courtroom and felt what that was like, it was a passion for me. It was something that I knew that I wanted to do. And then I actually interned at a firm that Ann used to be at, where I first started, and they opened some massive doors for me, Ann included. They gave me opportunities to go try cases, get in front of judges, get in front of juries, and I absolutely fell in love. And it was the right choice. I'm glad I did it.
Wow, that's cool. So when you say you walk into a courtroom and the feeling of a courtroom, so what is it specifically about a courtroom? And maybe when he's done, Ann, you can answer the same question.
Okay.
It's a little bit like walking on stage. You know, when I was in middle school, I used to do drama, and I loved being in front of crowds. I love that feeling of performing. And there's a performance aspect to it, but there's so much more because you have these clients who you care so deeply about. So there's that added emotion to it. And I don't know how to describe it other than you feel confident, you feel good, and you know that what you're doing has significant meaning at the end of the day, and that ideally you're helping people who have been harmed or wronged.
Well, based on that and kinesiology and being a strength coach, you probably should have been a weightlifter. One of those professional bodybuilders, man, the next Arnold Schwarzenegger, right?
Right.
Ann, how about you? What made you decide to go into law?
Well, I majored in medieval history at Stanford, so there was nowhere to go in that direction in terms of graduate school. So mine was by mistake. My dad basically said, I took a lot of drama since I was 6. I played classical piano and competed statewide. So I was like Evan, like more performer. And my dad said, you'd make a good lawyer. I'll help you with law school. And so that's where I ended up. The first day of law school, I didn't have books or a place to live because I was disorganized. What a surprise. And a gal that I got to Stanford with quit the first day. So I got her apartment and all of her books, and I was off to the races. It wasn't until I clerked for my judge in Seattle, Judge Dixon, the most intelligent and respected judge in King County. He drove a Trans Am with flames down the side, and he was the next prosecutor. I watched trials in his courtroom. I was hooked. I wanted to help underdogs. I represented the state in sex cases, child abuse cases, and everything else, and then went into private practice. So like Evan, it was like, it just worked for me. I mean, the first time I tried a case as a prosecutor, I'm like, this is where I belong, in a courtroom. And I've never left, and it's been 38 years of practice this year.
Wow. Yeah, it's fun when you finally narrow things down, and some people they find it when they first get started, like you guys did.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I kind of have bounced around. I was active duty Army, and then I was into some different sales, and then I finally, when my dad, I was talking to him, and I told him that pharmaceutical sales just wasn't doing it for me. He was like, "Well, come work for me. We want to launch the MVAC system, and beat our heads against the wall with the food industry for a while, and then we finally landed in forensics. And I can't tell you how much enjoyment I get when, especially like a detective or even a prosecuting attorney or somebody calls me up and says, hey, you're not going to believe what happened. So we were able to solve a case that was 40 years old or something like that. It's just, to me, that's just beyond exciting. And so I'm sure you guys, being in the courtroom and you have the verdict that you want come out, then the thrill of that has to be just off the charts.
Well, and Evan and I have been together, for a long time now. And the moment we got the verdict in the Cox case, we were with Ted Buck, our other lawyer that we tried the case with. And as you know, that was a $115 million verdict, for the death of those children. And everyone in Utah knows this case, and in Washington and around the world. But when that verdict came in, there was nothing like it. To see that jury during a pandemic, they'd been on hiatus, and they came back after many months and unanimously found in favor of our clients, Chuck and Judy Cox. There's nothing like that. Just like you're talking about, to have a case resolved, to get justice finally, for the recognition that children matter and the state has a real duty to protect children. And the jury spoke very loudly on that issue. But there's nothing like that. In fact, I looked over at Evan. I think I wrote him a note that said, what was that? Right, Evan? It was like, what?
It was, it was surreal. I don't think there was a dry eye in the courtroom. I mean, I could literally feel a tear coming down my eye as I was hearing this, because the way the numbers were actually read out, it was read for each individual boy, and the first number that was read was $57.5 million. And I remember thinking, did I hear that right? Is this actually happening? And you begin to think about how much time and effort you put into this and how committed you've been to this, but more importantly, sitting right next to us are the Coxes, and you're realizing how important this is to them on this journey that they've had as far as trying to find out what happened to their daughter, trying to seek justice for Susan, trying to seek justice for these two boys. Ann and I and Ted and our whole trial team, we stayed in a house together for months down in Olympia. And it was, we were working literally 20-hour days where you're waking up at 4:35 in the morning, prepping for trial each day. And then after trial ends at 4:30, you go back home, get a quick bite to eat, and then you're up till, midnight prepping for the next witnesses. I've sat through a number of verdicts, but that one, I think kind of tops it just for how long we've been working on that case. And just the feeling in the courtroom, the fact that we got stuck in a pandemic when everything happened, it was pretty amazing.
Wow, that is so cool. And I actually had a board meeting yesterday, and one of the things that we were talking to my board about was our marketing, our entire messaging for MVAC systems and everything that we do, we've kind of altered it to be more victim focused. And I know you guys, just from your what you just said, obviously, being focused on Susan and the two boys, and we'll segue into the actual talking about the case here in just a second. But I think a lot of law enforcement and the legal aspects of it sometimes, and especially the crime lab, I have to throw these. I deal with all three of you,
Right.
Those levels, and I think there's far too many people in the crime lab that lose focus on the victims and why they actually exist. And frankly, to me, if it's not all about helping the victim receive justice, because they're the one that's been wronged by far the most, and if it's not about focusing on them, then sometimes I'm like, well, why are you even here?
Right.
So I don't know if you guys have ever felt that way, but I'm sure in the times that you have, then hopefully the Cox case made up for it.
Right. And when I was a prosecutor, I spent a lot of time with the crime lab people and in the evidence room and at crime scenes, and everything else. And, I found, because really as a prosecutor, you're representing victims, even though you represent the state. But the passion that I had and the people in my office had, was extraordinary. We had the first sexual assault or special assault unit in the United States here in Seattle, and I was part of that as a young lawyer. And I think that's just so important, that you're not getting paid that much to be a prosecutor, that's for sure. In fact, when I left the office, I was like, well, I can finally get manicures and get my hair done and things like that, like my friends in the big law firms, But the fact is, you've got to rely on those people, and you've got to put them on the stand. And you hope that you can infuse in them some of the, the enthusiasm you have for the case and for justice and for victims.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we go any further, do you guys know Cloyd Steiger?
I do.
Okay.
He's,
yeah. How do you? I'm sure just working with him and prosecuting some of the homicides that he worked.
Oh yeah, and we had a case I won't go into the details of, but many years ago I represented Sergeant Cameron in homicide. I can talk to Cloyd about that another time. It was something else. But the last time I talked to Cloyd, an individual who ultimately shot a police officer in Seattle had come to see me first. He was upset about a case I was handling for a King County Sheriff's deputy. And he came in a couple of times and was identified after he shot the police officer as a person that came to see me. And I talked to Cloyd and I said, what do you think he wanted? And Cloyd said, oh, I think he wanted to kill you. And I'm like, oh, thanks. But he came into the law firm looking for me. And ultimately, he was convicted, etc. Cloyd's been here a long time. And I know he does a lot of true crime, public work and everything else, but a very fine homicide detective from Seattle.
Yeah, I first started working with Cloyd in what's called ASOC. It's a Cold Case Society.
Okay.
And yeah, what a fantastic guy. And if he's any indication of the law enforcement up there in the Seattle area, then you guys are well taken care of. And I have to also say, out of the entire United States, the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab system is one of the best.
Yes.
So you guys are in good hands up there.
Yeah.
So
I agree on all fronts.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, hey, let's transition into what I really wanted to talk to you guys about is your presentation down there at CrimeCon. And for all of you listeners down there, or that are watching or listening to this, if you are a true crime fan, you have to go to CrimeCon, because there are opportunities to hear people like Ann and Evan here, and all sorts of other law enforcement and other legal experts that they talk about the details of cases and scenarios and all sorts of weird things that happen to just normal citizens that I don't think you'll get anywhere else. And so just wanted to throw a plug in there. I've only gone to a couple of crime cons, but I just don't think I'll miss another one. And you guys' presentation, honestly, is one of the big sellers on it, because I was sitting in there, and I have to, oh my gosh. Um, Evan, when you were talking about some of these different guys that have basically killed their entire family, um, I had a few people in mind. I'm like, I know some guys like that. So, um, but let's start with Anne, if you could kind of describe your relationship with the Susan Powell case.
I started in the case before the law firm really did, because I was helping Chuck and Judy just get the word out to find Susan. So I started back, after she went missing and long before the boys were killed. I've been with Chuck and Judy for a very long time. I think of them as family, as Evan does, of course. And then of course I got involved when the boys were killed. We didn't work on the family law case or deal with, whether the kids had there was visitation with Chuck or Judy, things like that. That was a lawyer in Tacoma. But once that horrible tragedy happened, of course, we became involved and looked into what was happening with the state, and about 67 red flags they missed with Josh Powell, and also the big one, which is ignoring the fact that he'd killed his wife and the kids were witnesses, saying things like mommy's in the trunk, mommy's in the mind. I think all your listeners and viewers know those facts pretty well. We also got involved in a life insurance case because Josh had taken out $3.5 million worth of life insurance for his family and his wife, and then, of course, changed beneficiary to Michael, his brother. And so we had all of these legal issues to deal with. But I've been involved, I think, since, 12 years now, maybe even more, 2009. Anyway, with the family, also helping them with media appearances, trying this case. I've lived this case for over a decade. And the worst day of my life was the day I heard that the kids were killed. Chuck called me and he said, they're gone. And then he said, I'll never forget this. He goes, Anne, we told him so. And that's kind of how the trial ended. We told him so. We told him so. And it happened anyway. So hopefully what we've done here, you want to have a good deed in your life, like we've all been talking about, having your life have some meaning. For me, the biggest meaning I have is the legacy of this case and what that jury found and the work that we all put in, Evan, Ted, me and others in our firm, and of course the Coxes, to make this happen.
Now, Evan, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. Yeah, this case has pretty much been my entire career. I'm coming up on 12 years of practice, and I've been on this case for 11 years. And I first got involved actually because after Susan went missing, after Susan went missing, Josh and his father Stephen were parading around these journals that Susan had authored as a kid, and they were trying to make suggestions against Chuck and Judy that they had abused Susan. They said there was evidence that Susan clearly had run off with this other guy, as evidenced by these journals. So we had actually filed an injunction to prevent these being published. And interestingly, us doing that and them parading the journals really was kind of the catalyst for this search warrant on Stephen Powell's home. They use that as, we need these journals as part of our investigation into Susan's disappearance. So they executed that search warrant, which then in turn we know what happened. Stephen Powell gets arrested on the voyeurism and child porn charges. The kids get brought into state custody. And then as Anne indicated, we weren't involved with the family law proceedings. We were kind of aware of some of the things that were going on. But I also very much remember the day the boys died, because I got this very cryptic email from Anne. And I think all it said was, the boys are dead. He blew the house up. And I remember thinking, what? Because there was no title line to it. I'm going, the boys are dead. And then it took me a minute and I thought, oh my God, and then we've pretty much been fighting for them ever since. And we've gone through, we were in state court over to federal court, up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, back down to federal court, back to state court. Here we are, we got that verdict, and the case still goes on. So if people aren't aware, the state appealed the verdict. So we are now up in the Court of Appeals in the state of Washington, continuing to fight for Charlie and Braden.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. That I hadn't heard that they are actually appealing the case, and that,
Mm-hmm.
what is their justification for appealing? It's like, honestly, what did you say, Ann, in the I want to say there were like 37 major red flags or some crazy number like that.
Yeah,
I mean, you showed a graphic on that.
you could double that. It was horrendous. The red flags that were ignored. Of course, the biggest, which was no child has ever died in a secure visitation facility in the United States ever. And yet, knowing that Josh killed his wife, remember camping in a snowstorm with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and she just disappears, and that's the story that we all heard. But that the fact that he had killed his wife, there's probable cause to believe he killed his wife. There's a search warrant that's been executed. I mean, that we all know probable cause has to precede execution of a search warrant. Yet they have him alone with those kids. Right after he had been ordered to take a psychosexual evaluation and a polygraph. A polygraph. He doesn't want to take a polygraph when he's the main suspect in his wife's death. And all the other red flags along the way. I mean, we knew that he tortured animals as a kid, that he tried to kill himself, that he pulled a knife on his mom, that he molested a girl by the pool with his brothers. It goes on in terms of what was known about Josh Powell. And of course, Stephen's infatuation with Susan, and he didn't seem to mind that. There were just so many things. So we had these red flags, 60 some odd, that we showed to the jury. And then at the end, we put them all together, and you could see them all at once. And it only takes one. It really only takes one for the state to be negligent. And there were some 60 odd red flags. And that was very persuasive to the jury. States can't act this way. They can't, when they have children in their care, custody, and control, they can't act this way. Not the way they did with the loss of Charlie and Braden. Those poor little boys. I mean, there's only like a sock left on Charlie after the fire, and they lived for at least 10 minutes, maybe up to 20, and they were conscious the whole time that they were hatcheted to death and burned.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.